Once upon a time, there lived an orphan boy named Jide, whose mother died when he was 10. Right from when Jide was born, his mother, Bimbo, suffered from a very strange illness that no one was able to cure. She visited several healers, but the healers seemed not to know the cause of her sickness. After years of living in constant pain, Bimbo gave up the ghost, leaving her son Jide in the care of her twin brother Teo. Immediately after her burial, Teo took Jide in and cared for him like his son. At the time, Teo was still unmarried and lived alone in the village. After several years of being single, Teo met an extremely beautiful woman who he fell deeply in love with and decided to marry. Her name was Bunmi, and they met on the streets of the village one calm evening. Teo could not take his eyes off Bunmi and decided to strike up a conversation with her. This was the beginning of the love story that led to the beautiful marriage of the duo, whose wedding turned out to be the talk of the entire village. After their wedding, Bunmi moved in to live with her husband Teo, and Jide continued to live in their home with them. He was now an extremely handsome young man, and his uncle Teo took good care of him and ensured that he provided his every need. As time went on, Jide's uncle became so busy. He was always traveling out for work and was barely home with his wife, who grew lonely and bored with each passing day. She decided to make new friends in the village, and one day, one of her friends named Funk visited her home and caught sight of Jide, who was helping with household chores. Funk was so shocked to see Jide, as she never knew that he lived in Bunmi's home. She had seen Jide a couple of times in the village and wondered who he was and where he lived. Jide was so handsome, and Funk could not keep her eyes off him. She told Bunmi how lucky she was to be living under the same roof with such a handsome young man, and even went on to state that Jide was every woman's dream man. All through their conversation, Funk could not stop talking about Jide and how attractive he looked. The more she talked about him, the more Bunmi began to see Jide in a different light. Funk's constant admiration for Jide planted a seed of curiosity in Bunmi's heart. As days turned into weeks, Bunmi found herself paying more attention to Jide. Her admiration for him increased, as she could not help but feel a growing sense of affection for her husband's nephew. She did all she could to suppress her emotions, but her friend Funk made things difficult for her, as she advised Bunmi to express her emotions for Jide. Bunmi, following the counsel of her friend, decided to act on her feelings. One hot afternoon, whilst Jide was taking a nap in his room, he heard a very loud scream coming from his uncle's room. Fearing that something terrible might have happened, Jide rushed off to check on his uncle's wife Bunmi. To his surprise, he met Bunmi drinking in her room. She had a bottle of alcohol in her hand and was drinking all alone. Bunmi pleaded with Jide to have a drink with her, but Jide respectfully declined her offer, and Bunmi insisted, saying that it was her birthday and that she had no one else to celebrate her special day with apart from him. Jide, on seeing how sad Bunmi looked, decided to have a drink with her to make her day a whole lot better. He sipped the alcohol gently, and a few moments later, felt a huge slap on his face. It was his uncle, who had just returned from his trip, to find Jide drunk in his bed. His wife Bunmi was in tears, as she cried out and narrated to her husband how Jide came over to her room drunk and tried to force himself on her. Jide was so shocked to hear this, as he could not remember anything that happened. He tried to explain to his uncle that nothing of such happened, but his uncle was too furious to listen to what he had to say. He could not believe that his nephew, whom he had treated as his own son, would betray him in such a terrible way. Filled with so much anger, Jade's uncle punched him repeatedly and went on to alert the villagers of the atrocity that his nephew had just committed against his wife. The entire village gathered as they began to flog Jide mercilessly and paraded him around the village almost naked. Jide cried out to them that he was innocent, but no one cared to listen to him. They took him before the village leader, who decreed that Jide be given the ancient drink of madness as a punishment for his heinous crime. Jide pleaded with the village leader and tried to explain that he had no memory of all that happened. But the village leader, too, was not willing to listen to what he had to say. They forced the drink down his throat, and Jide, after a few minutes, ran mad and began to parade around the village. The villagers had no compassion for him, as they all believed that he was deserving of the punishment. He roamed the streets, mad, and ate from heaps of trash. His uncle, however, could not take his mind off everything that had happened and blamed himself for leaving his wife alone with his nephew, who he thought was a responsible young man. He apologized to his wife for all that she went through and promised not to ever leave her alone again. Not long afterwards, Bunmi realized that she was pregnant. The news of her pregnancy filled them with joy, as they could not wait to finally be parents. Months passed, and Jide's madness advanced to the village market. Legend has it that once a mad person finds his or her way to the village market, they stand a very small chance of ever recovering from their madness. And Jide was now at that stage of madness. However, the people noticed something strange about Jide's madness. He seemed to predict things before they even happened. It all started on one hot afternoon when a young girl walked past Jide with her mother. Jide warned them not to return home that evening, as a great danger awaited them. The girl's mother, thinking that it was just the ramblings of a madman, ignored him and returned home with her daughter. Later that night, whilst they were both asleep, a ravenous snake snuck into their bed and almost bit her daughter. Luckily, she woke up before the snake could do any harm to her daughter. This incident left the woman in shock, as she wondered how Jide knew that this would happen. The next morning, she went to the market with her daughter and decided to speak to Jide, who only smiled at her and made some mumbling sounds. The woman thanked Jide for his warning and began to spread the news around the village that Jide had a strange gift of predicting the future. She told them her story and how Jide warned her beforehand, and the people began to troop in their numbers as they approached Jide, seeking his guidance on their personal issues. Jide, to the amazement of all, gave the villagers accurate predictions, and they were all stunned to realize that the man who they made mad was now blessed with such great powers. The news of Jide's great powers reached the ears of his uncle's wife Bunmi, who was now heavily pregnant and struggling with some terrifying nightmares. Whenever she went to sleep at night, she saw herself being buried in the forest by an unknown force. With each night that passed, the dreams became more vivid, and this terrified her greatly, as she feared that something terrible might happen to her. As the months of her delivery drew closer, Bunmi grew restless and began to worry. She decided to pay Jide a visit in the market for him to predict her fate. But when she arrived, she met Jide standing in his usual spot, mumbling to himself. She approached him cautiously and pleaded to know what her future holds. And Jide looked her in the eyes and said, "The truth will come to light, and justice will be served." In that moment, Jide seemed so lucid, as though he was no longer mad. His eyes pierced through Bunmi's soul as he spoke, sending shivers down her spine, as she left the market unsettled, unsure of what to do. As the days went by, Bunmi's nightmares grew worse, as she found herself screaming out of her sleep, terrified, with her heart pounding in her chest. Unable to withhold the truth for much longer, Bunmi decided to confess. She gathered the entire village, including her husband Teo, and confessed to them that Jide was innocent. She revealed that Jide never forced himself on her, as he slept off after taking the alcohol. She told the villagers that she lied about everything and was extremely sorry for the damage that she had caused. Her husband Teo, filled with disbelief, asked her why she did what she did, and Bunmi revealed to him that she was so lonely and desperate for attention. She believed that if she made such accusations, her husband would spend more time with her. However, she never imagined that everything would spiral out of control, and pleaded for forgiveness. The entire village was in shock, as they could not believe that Jide had been innocent all the while. The village leader, realizing the gravity of the situation, ordered that the antidote of the drink of madness be given to Jide immediately to cure him of the madness that they had bestowed upon him unjustly. After a few minutes, Jide regained his sanity, and Bunmi, as well as his uncle and the entire village, apologized to him for all that they had put him through. The village leader then decided to banish Bunmi away from the village, but Jide could not stand this happening, as he pleaded that she be pardoned and given another opportunity to redeem herself. Moved by Jide's plea for mercy, the village leader reconsidered his decision and pardoned Bunmi, allowing her to remain in the village. This was a learning curve for Bunmi, who learned from her mistakes and vowed never to accuse a person falsely again. The lesson to be learned from this story is that a lie can ruin one's life forever. Therefore, we should be careful not to accuse people falsely, as the repercussions can be so fatal and irreversible. As a married couple, learn to attend to the needs of your partner, as not doing so can oftentimes lead them into falling prey to temptations. Lastly, learn the art of self control, as this would save you from making mistakes that you will regret in life. I hope you enjoyed the story.